All right, I don't know what time it is on your clock, but I know what I'm getting ready for. It is time for the Professional CISO podcast with David Malicoat.
Welcome, one and all, to the Professional CISO Show. I'm your host, David Malicoat. This show is an exploration of the topics necessary to transform the role of the CISO into that of a professional. All right, gang, special episode today. I have on a guest. His name's Ira Winkler, and he's Vice President and CISO at CYE. And we'll get into in a minute what exactly why. But ultimately, I saw this post that Ira posted on LinkedIn, and it struck a chord with me because it's something where, and I'm going to let him explain the details of it, but in the end, I think it's important. I think more people need to know about it. I think we need to explore the topic. I want to hear both sides of the equation, and so I went straight to Ira and I said, "Hey, Ira, would you be willing to come on and talk about this and provide your perspective?" So here he is, Ira Winkler.
Hi there.
Thanks for coming on, Ira. Number one, I appreciate you taking the time today. A little bit of a sensitive subject. I say sensitive, but maybe a little bit. It can be exciting a little bit. But in the end, can you describe to me? All right. So you wrote an open letter to the board of ISC², and it again, like I said, it kind of impacted me where I said, okay, this is important. I think we all need to, especially those like myself. I hold a CISSP as well, and I know you do also. The certification holders, that's something that we hold up, right? That's something that we hold up as kind of authoritative, kind of validation as well. And so, can you talk to me about why you wrote it and what the subject matter is?
So, why I wrote it, ironically, I started out not intending to write about what I consider wrong and inappropriate data, but I attended the ISC² Security Congress, where I've done for years, and during the event, the acting CEO got up and went into, well, there's 4.8 million openings, and we're going to bring in 1 million of those people. And I'm sitting there because I was talking to people throughout the event who were out of work. And, it's painful for these people to hear, oh, well, there's 3.5 million openings. If you listen to that one crappy line, then ISC² is touting 4.8 million. And these people are like, I've been out of work for like a year and I can't find a job. And I'm sitting there saying, okay, maybe let's acknowledge before you say there's 1 million openings, you start to acknowledge the pain people in the profession are going through. So I mentioned that casually to a friend. I'm like, I'm going to post something on LinkedIn. And people know me. And what happened was some members of the board of directors were passed on that I was going to upset with things. And they asked to meet with me after my session. And I was happy to do it. And I was really happy that they were interested, kind of surprised. But anyway, I went ahead and I said, look, they've got to be more responsive. And if you looked on my LinkedIn posts from I think it was roughly October 18th-ish, give or take, right after ISC², I put up, what ISC² can do to publicly support people who are out of work as an example. And I thought that was the concern. Then the acting CEO replied to it saying, well, here's the data we have. And she sent this report, which then went to a link, and I actually read the link in the report and everything like that. I'm like, wait a second, this data doesn't say what ISC² is saying it says. They were basically saying there's 4.8 million openings. And then when you actually look at the data, it actually says that, well, there's not really 4.8 million openings. The actual profession is flat, if not losing people, because in North America, Europe, and Latin America, there was roughly a job loss of 660,000 people. And that's assuming that data is right, which is kind of a stretch because it says nothing how they arrived at that data. But anyway, what happened was I started looking at it. I'm like, wait a second, there's not 4.8 million jobs. And when you look at the details, they say, well, in the ideal world, if we were going to properly satisfy cybersecurity concerns, we would have an additional 4.8 million people in the job, in the workforce doing cybersecurity. And I was like, That's a bunch of garbage. Sorry, you said you're going to ask me about curse words, but flat out, that's a bunch of bullshit.
Agreed.
Literally, they were going ahead and saying that it was 4.8 million openings. There weren't 4.8 million openings. It was in some fictional land where cybersecurity is fully satisfied. There's going to be 4.8 million more people needing to be hired, not where we are.
So let's break this down a second, right? So
Yeah.
what I'm hearing is, instead of openings in the job market, right? You go out to LinkedIn, Indeed, wherever you want to look for jobs, actual sites where the companies post. We don't have 4.8 million job openings. What I'm hearing is, if we were to do cybersecurity in an effective way, everywhere, every company, that's what the jobs would look like. Is that correct?
According to some mythical calculation by ISC², yes. And that's not really what it is. The actual fine print says these are not actual job openings. These are just some vague number. And I'm like sitting there saying, this isn't helpful. They're trying to convince people to enter the cybersecurity profession while, focusing on the new CC certification, which I think stands for Certified in Cybersecurity, which is a very basic level certification. And fundamentally, I have no problem with the certification. Just let me say that.
Right.
But what the problem is that they are misleading people into believing that if somehow they are getting this certification, it's going to open them up to a world where people are going to be throwing jobs and money at them. When you actually look at what it sounds like they're doing.
Right. And so
it is far from the truth.
So for clarity, this is not time bound. So we're not saying this is a projection into the future. We're saying this is how it sits right now.
This is how it sits right now. But if I tell you, you need, I don't, let's say, I mean, even projecting, I use the analogy right now. There are statistics and people who say legitimately that everybody should have 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day.
Right.
If, however, I tell farmers there is this massive need for fruits and vegetables because everybody is eating 5 fruits and vegetables a day, that would be a lie. Yes, people should eat that for health purposes, but telling somebody to actually invest time, money, effort into satisfying what is currently a fictional need is misleading and arguably unethical. And ISC² is supposed to go ahead. The only value, and I've written about this in the past, ISC² is not to serve the members in theory. ISC² is to go ahead and generate a legitimate need and protect the need for the certifications that people have paid to get, such as having a CISSP makes somebody better than somebody who doesn't have a CISSP. And that relies upon the credibility of the certifying organization and the certification itself. But when ISC² is tracking fundamental numbers, and we all know in the profession, we've seen the garbage of people saying there's 3.5 million job openings. We snicker. We know people are out of work. We know we can't find another job if we want it. We know there is no drastic need for entry-level cybersecurity professionals. But when the organization whose credibility is what we are paying for is saying this, that's a problem because it impacts the credibility. And ISC² is paid for by the people who have the certifications. Right. We are its quote unquote, Dr. Evil quotes, quote unquote, members.
Right.
And they serve the members, not, I don't need them to go ahead and give me wonderful things. I need them to make sure that the CISSP or whatever other certification a person might have is considered legitimate and valid. But if ISC² loses the credibility, which frankly, it has been doing over the years, because you see people say, I get nothing out of my CISSP, and I still respond, you're not the person who gets anything out of the CISSP. The people who hire you are the people generating the perceived need, not you. But still, we are going ahead and they're trading on our legitimacy as a profession to generate fake numbers. I don't expect, for example, honesty to a large extent from private organizations like EC Council and now CompTIA to say what the need is for the certifications that they are making a profit off of. However, ISC² is a nonprofit that is supposed to serve the members and at least provide a legitimacy to the certification, which again requires that they be credible. And this is just flat out lying, in my opinion, and impacts the credibility of the certification I've held for roughly 30 years.
So let's talk real quick about kind of the downstream impacts. Let's talk two things. How does it impact that person that is seeking to get into cybersecurity? Let's talk about that one first. What are the potential impacts?
So the downstream impacts to entry-level people is, frankly, they're being misled to get into a profession. I have hired entry-level people. And frankly, getting a certification is a nice to have. And it's a starting point. And we need people, but really the people we're hiring for a lot of even entry-level jobs are people who have experience in other what I call cybersecurity adjacent roles, such as a help desk person, such as a NOC analyst transitioning to a SOC analyst position, such as a network administrator transferring into be a security administrator. But even then, the reality is the bulk of the openings are in skilled positions, non-entry level positions. These are people who have a background because fundamentally, cybersecurity, and people call me gatekeeper for this, but fundamentally, you can't secure something if you don't know how to underuse the underlying technology. That's issue number one. There is also, for example, non-technical roles, which is important to understand, such as project manager, even people with like awareness and GRC roles and things like that. But even those roles have collateral experience. Project managers, for example, are critical to good, repeatable programs. But many of those people have been project managers in other disciplines because we need somebody to herd the cats, for lack of a better term. And there are very experienced certified project managers to get. Even like awareness, everybody says, oh, awareness is a good non-technical, but I'm like, no, I wrote books on awareness. Awareness means, okay, a good awareness person understands user interface design. They understand education materials. They understand statistics and a variety of other disciplines. And a lot of these people come from other GRC positions as well. So you need to understand that there are all these disciplines that require some level of experience. Now, yes, having a basic certification helps for somebody to transition from a cybersecurity adjacent position into cybersecurity. But there's, again, the actual entry level roles are few and far between.
So how does this affect the cybersecurity leaders that are hiring, right? Like myself, like yourself, like CISOs out there, directors, manager levels. How does that affect us?
So how it affects us is we are being bombarded by people who somehow believe the crap that there is millions of open positions. Fundamentally, does this impact me? No. As a CISO, no. Am I gonna, I want people to have a certification, not because it proves expertise in general, but it proves that this person has devoted time, money, and effort into being professionalized. And that's fundamentally valuable. There's there's a clip that I've seen going around from the new TV show Tulsa King with Sylvester Stallone, and it talks about what's the value of a college degree. And Sylvester Stallone in this little clip, and I want everybody to go on YouTube and watch it. It's only 20 seconds. But it's like, nobody expects you to know anything with a college degree. But it says that you've shown up for a few years, you've done assignments somehow good enough within a legitimate time frame, and that potentially this demonstrates to me that you can do a job in a legitimate time frame for me in the professional world. I'm paraphrasing, but that's underlying value of, for example, a college degree. It's the underlying value of a certification that I see that you've developed time, effort, and your own money frequently into learning about this, that I can trust you, that you're not just following a paycheck.
Right.
Because there's a lot of people with a lot of skills out there, and what they might not have a certification that might be just as good as a certified person. But I want to see that they want this to be their job, that they're enthusiastic. That isn't that might be a deciding factor where all else is equal. Do I think everybody, I'm only going to hire certified people? No. But is it a distinguishing factor when all else is equal? Yes.
Yeah, and I would say, what I've always tell people is discipline and rigor, right? I think discipline and rigor over time, you can't beat it. Okay,
Right.
so
And I should also add, but
Please.
if people stop getting certified because they believe that they are being scammed, that they are not finding value in it, that the legitimacy goes, it's going to impact everyone because there's not going to be the need. And I'm going to see, hey, that person has a legitimate reason not to have a certification.
Right.
And
And
It is
I've
a
seen it
legitimate
too.
reason.
I've seen it too, Ira. I've seen it where I've seen CISOs and others that are like, I just let my CISSP lapse. Not me personally, but I let it lapse because I was not finding value in it anymore. And that to me that's concerning when I hear it.
Well, I think that in many cases, do I honestly need a CISSP? I'm known in the industry. People are going to, I've had positions like chief security architect at Walmart, chief security strategist at HP. Nobody is ever going to look at Ira and snicker, oh, but he doesn't have a certification. The reality, though, is I see a value in it. I also see a reduction of liability. A good certification is kind of like there because you can imagine class action lawsuits coming out these days,
Right.
and the deposition saying, are you certified? And for the average person, it's like, no, yes, no. And if somebody says they aren't certified, a good class action attorney is just going to say, so there's like 400,000 CISSPs that have at least a legitimate and acknowledged base of knowledge that you didn't hire. Why can't you find one of those people with an acknowledged base of knowledge to have done this job?
Right.
So anyway, that's kind of what I see the value in certifications beyond the obvious.
So let's move into your engagement with ISC² after the post. As I had said before we started, I saw where they had responded in the comments, and I say they as in the account, the ISC² account itself on LinkedIn. So talk to me about your engagement. Talk to me about that. I'll probably ask you some questions out of that.
So the engagement, they claimed that there were repeated attempts. I mean, no, after the first response, like I told you, I went ahead and put out 3 articles. Like I said, the first one was regarding the lack of concern for current unemployed members. And that they responded in general. I got a friend request from the acting CEO of ISC², and that was it. That was the closest they came to engagement. Then, in the last one, the open letter that everybody's referring to now, that one very specifically said, we have had repeated attempts to reach out to you. It's like, no, you haven't. Dan and James reached out to me at the event, and I met with them. I accepted a connection request. It's LinkedIn, a connection request from the CEO. That was the extent of them reaching out. And fundamentally, do I need them to reach out? And the answer is not really. If they have an explanation of the data, if I misread the data, I'm happy to talk to them. I'm happy to print a retraction if I am wrong. Because again, I want and I need ISC² to be valuable to both the profession and the world in general. I need them to be credible. And if I'm wrong, I want to go ahead and publicly retract it. But in the absence of them not giving data and the crap that they replied with, I mean, honestly, everybody can reply. It was just like or read the replies. It was just a bunch of generic stuff.
Right.
Again, we attempted to reach out to you, which they said twice, which again is a flat out provable lie that they responded with, which again made it spiral downward. But again, if they were going to come and say, here's how you misinterpreted the data, that's a good conversation.
Right.
That's not what they're doing.
So is there, what do you believe the response should be? Is this a case where, like, if I were part of the ISC², that I come back and I say, hey, we understand what you're talking about. Yeah, from all the comments, I mean, there were thousands, hundreds, maybe even thousands of comments on, particularly on the letter.
There were hundreds.
Yeah,
so.
hundreds, I would say. But to be able to come back and say, we acknowledge that, what you're saying is there's a validity there. Let's talk through this engagement, but in a public way as well, right? Where you have the ability to say, hey, do an analysis or uncover something or change somebody's mind. But in the end, I didn't see, just from my short period of time in those comments, anything that supported ISC²'s position other than what ISC² was saying itself. Everyone else was really chiming in on yes, this doesn't seem correct. So is the engagement public? Is it private? Is it, what should that look like from your perspective?
Frankly, the fact anybody cares what I say is irrelevant. The problem is that I put something out and hundreds of people liked it and commented on it in support. And what that says is there is a perception issue with ISC² as a whole. Nobody out there saying, well, gee, ISC² has been a legitimate organization for decades, and how could you question them or whatever else? I usually get people who hate me just reply for the hell of it. And it just didn't happen.
Right.
And in this case, what I think there should be is like, look, ISC² needs to go ahead and acknowledge that the data that they are promoting is essentially fictional.
Right.
They need to go ahead, and it's not for me, it's for the members who are out there who are not finding jobs, who feel like shit.
Right.
Because they hear millions of jobs and they can't get one. And that's the biggest problem. That's a moral issue. That goes beyond ethics, which again, misleading people to purchase. Well, it's hard to say it's not exactly a purchase of CC because they're not charging for it, but they give people a free CC if they test well, but then they have to pay $50 a year to renew it.
Right.
There is a financial aspect to that. That's misleading, potentially unethical, potentially fraud.
Right.
Potentially. I don't know the legalities.
Agreed.
But, what should they be doing? The board should have oversight. The board should step in and say, hey, he's right. And frankly, they should have done this proactively, in all honesty. They should have said, these numbers, I know many of the board members. These are not stupid, naive people. These are legitimate professionals. And they should have said, this does not make sense from what we're seeing.
So Ira, real quick,
Yeah.
the way you state that is if the board maybe didn't have forehand knowledge of this, let's call it, approach. What if they did? What if it's a case where, like, that was a strategic decision by the ISC² board? I mean, do we know any of that information? Is that a question I need to ask them if they decide to come on?
Well, frankly, so I've been, I was president of the ISSA International Board for a period of time. I know what volunteer boards are, which is really a lot of formalities. The management organization presents you with data and you look through it, you get asked for opinions. Perhaps ISC²'s board did not realize the depth of this. And frankly, this has been going on for a couple years.
Right.
when you look at the data within the 2023, I didn't look past 2023, but the data within 2023 report says basically the same thing. This is not new. This is just the first time somebody made a big deal about it, apparently. And the board, I don't care what happened. I frankly don't. I just want the board as a whole to say, wait a second, does Ira have a point? Could this be an ethical, is it ethical? Whether or not it's, because ethics is what happens when nobody's looking.
Right.
You know, now people at least are looking. Is it ethical to go ahead? Is it ethical to go ahead and essentially put out numbers that are fictional? You know, I argue, and I think legitimately, that fictional numbers, like going ahead and saying 4.8 million numbers because we think that in the ideal world, there's 4.8 million openings. That's a fictional number.
Right.
That's not what it is right now. And frankly, it's not even what it will be should everything happen.
Right.
And this serves nobody except it barters on the reputation of ISC² and its board members to put out a number to convince people that they should join a profession and pay a certification fee for and invest more time. And it's okay if people want to do that, but they should not be, in my opinion, misleading people into doing so. Because a lot of people are just going into they're getting there and they're like, oh, what's the hot profession now?
Right.
And they're using these ISC² numbers to sell these crappy boot camps. They're using these numbers to sell different courses and get people into college degrees that they're going to pay tens of thousands of dollars for based on these numbers. ISC² needs to go ahead and say, look, there's nothing wrong in the profession. We do, however, have to represent the current state of the profession accurately.
Right.
Is there going to be 4.8 million openings? Maybe. Have we analyzed and looked at the legitimacy of these numbers? I don't think so. I did not see anything except they created some formula that they won't tell you what it is, pulling in Bureau of Labor statistics and some other data along with their survey information and sprinkle fairy dust, and poof, we have 4.8 million openings.
Got it. So I'm going to read a quick quote from your open letter. What makes this important is that the operational employees do not seem to know the profession and look at ISC² as a generic organization, would-be business. Can you speak a little bit about that statement relative to, we're cybersecurity professionals. I think we would expect that our professional organization would at least have cybersecurity professionals that are heavily involved.
So let me be kind of I mean, a lot of people don't want to admit this, but there are people who are professionals in association management. ISC² is a professional association. The American Medical Association is a professional association. You do need qualified association professionals for many of the jobs in knowing how to maintain membership. These are not like, for example, doing ombudsman for members to make sure that they get data, printing out, sending out invoices, creating the testing, for example, making sure the testing processes are correct and everything. Those are legitimately put together by association professionals. However, the original, when I started talking about this, ISC², because I've also got a lot of communications from former board members and, more importantly, former employees, which are telling me, I don't know the accuracy, but they're indicating the dysfunction of the organization as a whole. They just had the CEO depart without naming a successor in advance. That is, in any business, not a good sign.
Right.
And in this case, what I was mentioning was I've known this organization for 30 years or so. I've known the people who founded the organization. And what happened is there's been so much turnover, I barely know the people who are who work there anymore. And what that means is these people who are negotiating deals with, for example, potential sponsors, the people who are dealing with the test question issues and so on, have not, even if they are association members, they have not had the opportunity to learn the profession. They have not had the opportunity to learn the fine points. They do not understand that, hey, we are a professional association. We need to, our organization membership or training revenue or whatever it is, because somebody contacted me and said, like, training has been stagnant. That's all they had insight into. But probably other things have been stagnant as well, given the numbers we see, even in their report, given the profession is stagnated. So these people do not have a fundamental understanding, in my opinion, that cybersecurity professionals, we sell trust. At the end of the day, we are much like a bank. We are providing trust to the organization. Yes, we're providing competence and we're providing trust. And as I mentioned before, in probably similar or different words, we have been, ISC² is bartering our trust that we have earned as a profession, or our members have given it for 30 years, to put out numbers that are not representing the profession as it is.
Right.
And those are the numbers they touted, because when the CEO of ISC² gets up on stage and talks about 4.8 million openings, or whatever the wording was, as opposed to our members are experiencing hard times, that's a very clear decision that their communications people have put forth. Their communications team has put forth this narrative of a profession which is just throwing money at people and scooping up anyone.
Right. And I think the thing that comes to my mind is the cognitive dissonance that's created, right? Where it's like, I know too, there are a lot of folks looking to get in and they're having a very hard time, as well as I know a lot of CISOs, not a lot of jobs are open right now, right? And I mean, my peers are not necessarily hiring, and they're very coveted spots, and I've heard of thousands of applicants on a per job basis. So I agree with you on that. And one thing I want to tell the audience is the show does have multiple invitations out to ISC², particularly the acting CEO, as well as others through the generic accounts, to have one of the representatives of obviously of sufficient level, executive level, to come on the show, talk about this, because I think from our perspective, we talk about being the professional CISO or being professional in our industry, having the ability to come and have these critical conversations, making sure that we see something, you say something like Ira did, and then be able to go and at least have a discussion about it, to say, something's not right here, at least get to the bottom of it. Like Ira said, hey, I'm more than happy to print a retraction if you can say that, you can show me that what I'm onto is not actually correct. So that all being said, I want to wrap this up with 10 questions for Ira Winkler. Ira, number one, I appreciate you coming on. I was very, you made me laugh on our exchange when I did the invitation. I'm not going to tell people exactly what you said, but same thing here.
No,
I don't
it probably
mind.
is. I'm a media whore. So.
Okay, you said it. But in the end, 10 questions with Ira Winkler. What's your favorite word?
I don't know if it's my favorite word, but I love serendipity.
Like that. What's your least favorite word?
God, I have so many pet peeves. It's like it's probably arguable. I mean, it's probably some word that implies legitimacy that isn't there. I'm at a loss off the top of my head to know what it is, but there are just so many words like that.
Right. What area of your work do you find most interesting?
Frankly, what I love doing is I speak at a lot of events every year. It's part of my responsibility for my company is outreach, and I just love getting together and meeting people in person. It's not that nice when they're out of work and I can't find them a job, but otherwise I love meeting and engaging with people.
What area of your work is most challenging for you?
I would say managing cybersecurity programs. I mean, there's just so much going on. See, I like to look at a cybersecurity program much like a proverbial ship. And your job is to put process, as a CISO, your fundamental role is to put processes in place that, look, the ship will go off course. There are going to be incidents. Most incidents should fit within your processes and keep your ship generally there,
Right.
but creating the processes to keep the ship in the general direction, where it's like 99% of the time you're off course, but the process to keep it on course, that's the hard part.
What sound or noise do you love?
What noise do I
What
love?
sound or noise do you love?
Probably something sexual related. I'll
Okay.
give you that.
Understood. What sound or noise do you hate?
I mean, there are so many annoying screeching noises. I can't think of which one is more,
Category's good.
more than others.
What's your favorite curse word?
I don't know if it's my favorite, but I do say fuck a lot.
Seems to be the popular one when I ask that question of all my guests. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
People don't know this, but I actually have won Emmy Awards for creating and producing a family travel series with kids.
That's awesome.
So if I could do that, I'd go back in. I was moving my show to PBS, then 2008, 2007 to 9, I can't remember what. The economy went to hell and I lost my funding from US Airways and Panasonic. And if I could go back there or cruise around the world full time,
Yeah.
I would do that.
What profession would you not like to do?
This sounds bizarrely, but I learned I'm a really, really good programmer. I can figure it out, but God, I hate sitting in front of a desk 8 to 12 hours a day, because I will be obsessive sitting at a desk, to get something done. But God, do I hate sitting at a desk constantly. And like I said, I'd rather sit, 12 hours on an airplane than 8 hours at a desk.
Finally, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear your God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
You get the celebrity mansion.
Ira Winkler, I appreciate your time. Number one, I appreciate you coming on. I think we as an industry have to have the courage to step up and say the things when we see that they're wrong. And I saw that you did that, which is naturally exactly why I reached out. That's the whole point of this show, is to have the critical, have the provocative conversations. And so I want to thank you. Stay tuned, and I'll keep in touch with you as well as I hear. If you hear anything from ISC², would love to hear it, because I'm a stakeholder as well with mine, and I have multiple people that I know in my mentor, my mentees, let's say, that are have skin in the game. So I want to hear how this comes out.
I just want to close with that point, because fundamentally, I want and need ISC² to be credible and successful. And it pains me to write an article
Right.
that criticizes them in any way, especially when I am in arguments defending them
Right.
on a regular basis. And it just, they need to focus on, they've begun to lose. There are people who are always going to be cynical, but the unfortunate part is this is crossing them from the people who are cynical to the people who are going to question their credibility.
Right.
And that's the biggest problem.
Great. Well, Ira, I appreciate your time today. Thanks again. And so, colleagues and friends, I renew the call. It's time to professionalize the role of the CISO. With that, I wish you health, happiness, and success on your journey in becoming the professional CISO. Let's do this.
We're professionalizing the CISO role, so please subscribe to the Professional CISO podcast.